Again, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. We have 3 Master, MyStar, Rockstar teachers with us today. People who've been doing this at least as long as I have. And they have some really great tips and tricks and things that they do in their classroom that they're going to share with us. And I know when I was in the classroom, I loved stuff like this because I could always walk away with 1 or 2 ideas. Even if I didn't do it exactly the way that other person did it, it's like, oh yeah, I could take what I do, make it a little better. So we're gonna launch into that in just a second. So we have Ashley Poole here today. She's from Kalamazoo Public Schools. John Para is from Adams Township School District in the UP. And then Megan Throm is here from Berkeley Public Schools, which is in Metro Detroit. So we're kind of representing all over Michigan here. And all 3 of these teachers are just really, truly master teachers, and they're going to share some real good stuff with you. And so our session outline is really simple. Ashley, Jen, and Megan are going to share their best organizational strategies. And then when we're done, I'm going to put each one of them in a breakout room. We'll have 3 breakout rooms, and you will have the option to join a breakout room and then leave it and join another one, kind of a thing. And so you can pop in and out and talk to them individually if you want a little more detail or bounce some ideas off them or bounce some ideas off some of the other teachers who are here. And then we'll do a real quick wrap up and then we'll be good for today. So thanks. Yep, and Dr. Bell's here. Thank you. Good to see you. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Ashley, and she's going to share with you some of the things that she does. Ashley.
All right. Thanks, Chris. So first is my summary table. And I was actually just digging one out so I could show you how I grade them as well. But I have transitioned to doing them all this way this year. It was something I kind of played with last year. And it was helpful for the kids staying organized, and it was helpful for me to grade. So I fill in A and B just straight off of the teacher summary table. I copy and paste it. Sometimes I'll shorten it up if it's really long, but usually just exactly what it says there. And then I insert a row and I put the gotta have checklist there. And it is so helpful for kids who are absent and they're not looking at the slides to have that checklist. It's helpful for them to self-grade before they do it. And then I use it to grade their work. And I think on the next, so if you want to go to the next one. Mm-hmm. So I only grade row C because I fill in A and B anyways. And I do it as a formative assessment halfway through the class or halfway through the lesson. I have the kids self-check before they submit it. Not all of them do. 6th graders are terrible at this. 7th graders are better. But it's something that as the year goes on, they get better at to self-check. A lot of them will check the boxes off themselves. And then as I grade them, I put either a check mark if they fully explained it, a half if it's partially or kind of correct, and then a question mark if they're missing it. And they're all out of 10 just to make my life easier. And I pulled one up here. I don't know if you guys can see it very well or see my screen at all. My camera's iffy. But I just go through and do that. And then I put any other feedback down at the bottom, which parts are incorrect. I'll put question marks if they miss the vocab words and they're not including them in their explanation. I'll just put a little quick question mark. And they all know and are trained. All right, if there's a half, I didn't explain this very well. If there's a question mark, I totally forgot this. If it's a check mark, I know I'm good and I can move on. So that has helped with grading it. It's helped with the kids self-checking. It's helped with the kids who, when they're absent, especially we've had mega flu season here and COVID season, and kids are in and out. So that really helps them go back to go back and fix it if they got it wrong, or make it up if they weren't here. So that's my summary table. Another thing that I think has really helped in the last few years has been our science department is nice enough to buy us all 1-inch binders. I keep them in class. I have 2 crates per class. I have a whole bookshelf. They go in there. They grab them at the beginning of the hour. and it stays in class. And each lesson, I take all the handouts and everything except the check your progress. I put it in a packet, I staple it, I hole punch it. They're numbered at the bottom. They are numbered consecutively. I found that when I was numbering, like, lesson 1 has a 1, 2, 3, 4, and lesson 7 has a 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I said turn to page whatever, they would go to the wrong lesson. So if I can say go to page 53, they know, okay, that's a later lesson. I'm going to jump right, make sure I get the right lesson out. And that helps for when they inevitably accidentally pull their packets apart, they can put them back in order. I also put a notes page where they can record important information as we go through the share phase. And we usually, the 6th grade and we do that together. 7th grade, they're a little bit more independent on writing their own notes after they read a share resource or something. But basically everything goes in there. And kids are trained that if it is hole punched, you better put it in the rings because it's important and you cannot throw it away until I tell you to. And then things that are like their warm-ups, sub work, bell work that I don't care if they keep. Once it's graded, they know they can recycle it as long as it's correct in their grade, because those ones aren't hole punched. And then their homework, which is their vocabulary and their check your progresses, I hole punch them after I grade them so that they know they can store them in their binder at that point. So it takes a lot of training, but as soon as they see hole punched, the first 6 weeks of the year, I'm like, it's hole punched. What does that mean? And they all tell me it goes in their binder and so on. It's helped a lot with, not having to run back to the locker to get things. We have a lot of students who don't bring anything to class other than their bodies. So this just stays in the room, cuts down on the in and out, cuts down on, finding things in their big binder if they have one. It's just so much faster. So I do almost everything on paper with them that way. And when I grade their packets, they, after the summary table, after we do that, they give me the whole packet. They don't take it apart because it'll get lost and it'll, fall apart later. And then they got to staple it. They just turn the whole thing in. I grade it. I get the whole thing back, give them their feedback. Everything else, I kind of just, their uncovers, their anchors, their connects, anything else that's in their packet, I just walk around and visually inspect it as participation every day. And I just make a little note next to their name every day, like check mark, yep, they did everything, or, -3, they didn't do 2/3 of the work today or something like that. But the only thing that I'll grade in their packet is their summary table for actual assessment. You can go to the next one. Okay. So bubble maps, I do a modified version of the procedure that's in the lessons, and I actually just started it this year. So each student has a page like the one you see on the screen. It's at the back of their lesson 1 packet, and it gives them a space to write their 3 questions. I used to do the Post-it note thing, and it drove me insane, and I would have Post-it notes all over the floor at the end of the day. And they wouldn't fill in their own Post-it notes, or I couldn't tell whose was whose. And at least this way I can walk around and see, okay, like they physically have 3 questions written down. So they'll write with their 3 in their packet. They will share with their table group. One person in the group is in charge of putting their 3 best questions in a Jamboard. And then later with some classes, if I have time, I'll go over it with them and we'll kind of reword and combine and things. Those are generally my more higher functioning classes. In the lower functioning classes, I kind of do it for them, model it in front of them. And in some classes, if we're out of time, we're out of time. I'll do it on my time. And then I print it for them from the Jamboard, like just make a PDF from it, print it out for them, hole punch it, and they put it in their binder, and then they can answer it as we go. It also works really well because if they're being naughty and refusing to participate, they have to handwrite the whole thing, and they hate doing that. So it, pulls double duty. I can make it faster, or I can make you write a lot. And that usually gets them to participate a lot more in the bubble map. And I'm not the greatest at going back to it, but some classes I do remember. So it's nice to have them have that, and they can always, you know, time filler, go back and fill in your bubble map. All right, and then my last thing that I had in there is to check your progresses. I've put 90% of them into Google Forms. Sorry, my class lights just went off. I have set them all up so that I'll put automatic feedback, because if you set up a Google form and you do it as a quiz, you can set it to automatically give a comment if something is wrong. Like the example on the screen is from 7-2, one of their embedded assessments. And usually the wrong answer is because they're not thinking about the continents moving. So that tends to be my feedback for that question. So I just put it in there. And then as soon as they finish the assessment, they can see, oh, I got it wrong because of this, and I need to think about this. Or sometimes if I have a good video to reteach, I can insert that video there. They can go back, watch the video, figure out what they got wrong, and fix it. I also like doing it in Forms because I don't have to flip through papers. I can just click through Google Forms, do, you know, everybody's question 3, copy and paste common feedback. You know, if I'm finding a lot of people are saying the same thing, I'm just copying and pasting, so that I'm not spending 10 years on typing them out or handwriting them out. So I do 90% of them on Google Forms. There's maybe 10% where it's too difficult to transfer, usually like a modeling question. So I, you know, will still do some of those on paper, but I really like doing it in Google Forms. It's so much faster for you. And I was telling Jen, when I have a modeling question, I will copy and paste the model into Google Forms and then, or into Google Slides, and then make it a Pear Deck slide. And if you've never used Pear Deck before, they have drawing tools. And so the kids click on the link in their Google form, takes them to the Pear Deck slide. They do their response. They go back, it auto saves. They check that they did it, and then I can go through and do feedback on their models without having to like have paper and, you know, have them turn in this half slip or do the whole thing on paper. And that's cut down on a lot of grading time also. So, and I think that's all of the ones I have, Chris.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, I'm just listening to this thinking of all the time I spent passing back papers. And like, if you could reduce that, like that would take up 15 or 20 minutes a week, right? That's amazing. All right, thanks. So Ashley will be in a breakout at the end here. So if you have questions or want to get more details, hang on to them. And next up is Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Para. So we can go to the next slide. I just thought I'd throw this out there. I'm sure that lots of districts have their own thing, but our middle school team started doing it this year, and we've noticed that the grades are more in line with students' ability. We felt like there was a lot of inflation happening with kids getting points for participation and all the other things. So we make major grades 60% of their overall grade, minor grades 40%, instead of having categories for tests, quizzes, homework, activities, projects. Some teachers had a lot of categories, and this is just examples of, like, for me, I do this in my math class too, because I teach math and science, so it's a little different. But in science, the major grades would be the check your progress. If it's something I want to grade, sometimes I don't grade them all. Embedded assessments, the unit tests, their final projects, slides, presentations. And then the minor grades are the daily work, the unit summary tables, their science words. Sometimes I might grade the student guide, especially if I think nobody's filling it out, you know, their bubble maps that they maintain. So I just thought I would throw that out there. And it's not my idea. I saw it on somebody else's blog, but I liked it and it seems to be working. My general organization, no binders. Our students, I don't know, my classes are small too. I think that makes a big difference. I have less than 20 kids in each of my sections because we're really small. So each student has a folder, paper copies of everything go in the folder for the unit. I basically tell them the folder is your book because we don't have textbooks. So bring that every day. And that's the only thing you have to bring besides your writing implement. And then they do have a notebook so they can write down their science words and definitions as we go through the share if they need to jot down any notes. I put copies of all of my lesson slides in Google Classroom, but I post it as materials. I found that's really helpful when a student is absent, especially if, you know, a lot of the 8th grade units, there's a video they need to watch, and then they can just go to the Google slide, get the video. If they miss science words and definitions, they can go into the Google slides and get the words and the definitions to update theirs. So that is, you know, a lot of kids don't ever look at it, but the ones that are absent, I find it's helpful. I can tell them we did slides, you know, 28 through 32, make sure you look at those. So that's kind of my general organization. And then I should say at the end of, like Ashley said, when at the end, don't throw anything away until I tell you to. I do the same thing at the end of the unit. That's their favorite thing to do, is take everything in there. And we have to rip all the staples off before we recycle the paper. And that's their favorite thing, is ripping staples, throwing them away, and dumping everything into the recycling bin. So for my unit summary tables, I am going to add the gotta have checklists though now, like Ashley said. I printed on colored paper, usually this awful yellow that we have, because somebody 20 years ago ordered reams and reams of this goldenrod paper, and we have tons of it. But it's so easy to just tell the kids, get out your yellow packet. I've started putting sentence starters in because I think it was unit 8.1 was revamped for this year, and they had a lot more scaffolding for the unit summary table, and the kids really liked it, and I liked it as well. So I've been putting in little sentence starters and scaffolds. I do have my students fill in row A and B on their own, and it was only because they're 8th graders, so I feel as if they've been doing this long enough, they should be better at it. But somebody said to me once, I was filling in A and B for them, you know, what did we do? What evidence did we gather? I said, well, I fill that in because they know what we did. And somebody said, do they really? And I realized they have a hard time articulating what we did and what evidence they gathered. So I do have them fill that in, but I just wanted to throw this little picture up to show you what it looks like with the sentence starters. To me, it's not really giving much away, but it's not really giving anything away, but they know at least like, okay, I need to talk about these things. And for a lot of my units, I've started taking out row D because I feel as if it's very repetitious with whatever they had to write in their unit challenge packet for when they did the connect to the unit challenge. They feel like they're just writing the same thing. So I thought, you know what, and that's the kid's grown. I don't know. I'm sure all of your students love to write, but mine hate it. And I mean, they hate the yellow packet. It's the bane of their existence. Get out your yellow packet, and they're like, because they don't want to write. So taking off the row D has helped with that a little bit. I think if we go to the next slide, please. So this is just a picture of what it looks like when I grade it. Like Ashley, I do give them feedback as they're writing. I do it a little bit differently. So I have them do all of this in class, not as homework, because I have found that if I ask them to do it outside of class, I get 20 of the exact same answer because it's 20 kids, but one of them figured it out and all their friends got it. So this forces them to have to do their own work. I know it takes time, but I feel like it's worth it, because to me, that row C is really where it all comes together for them. As they're writing, I always tell them, you know, when you're done, raise your hand if you want me to give you feedback on your answer. And if I read the answer and it looks like what I want, I put a star. And then later when I collect it, I don't even read it again. And they know once they get the star, they're getting full credit for that answer. So it really streamlines grading once I collect them. And I have them leave it in a packet. When they turn it in, it's just open to that page. I grade it, hand it back to them. So I do have that deadline of getting it graded before they need the packet again, but it goes so much faster. And the row, usually they're pretty good at getting their A and B answers, because we'll talk about it. Okay, what did we do? And the kids will discuss it and I'll say, okay, write that down in your unit summary table. What evidence did we gather? Like, what did you see happening? Because I feel like they still don't get evidence and reasoning. So this is me trying to hammer at evidence as something that you either read or you saw happening. And then, but I love the idea of putting that gotta have checklist in there so that they can use it for row C, because I have it up on the slide, like you said, Ashley, but if the kids are absent, then they have to go back to the slides and they don't always do that. And as I'm reading the answers, I'll tell the kids, you know, this is really good. And if you look at that checklist, I think you did a great job talking about the first two items, but I don't see where you said anything about, you know, whatever, XYZ, what's missing. So, and then they'll write a little bit more, or I'll tell them, maybe you should write one more sentence telling me about why gravity is affected by mass and distance. Because like this one that you have the example, a lot of kids would say gravity is affected by mass and distance, and then they'd stop. And I say, well, can you tell me how it's affected by mass and distance? And then they write a little bit more, and then I give them, you know, put the star. And there are some kids who will never, ever, ever ask me to look at their answer. But usually early on in the year, most of them figure out that, hey, if she reads my answer and puts stars by all of them, I'm going to get 10 out of 10. And I also, like Ashley said, I just make them all worth 10 points because it's easy. So that's my unit summary. And for the bubble maps, I start off very similar to what Ashley does, where the kids come up with their 3 individual questions. And I have my kids keep their own paper copy of the bubble map, as you can see, but we have a class copy on the Jamboard. And as we answer questions, I'll just change the color of the question. So you can see this is the unit I just finished. And then at the end, sometimes we have extra questions we didn't get to because scientists don't always answer every question. So we cross those out. And I put a sample of a student bubble map there. So you can see, I don't ask them to put super detailed answers because that's usually on their unit summary table. But, you know, just like that short, sweet, I would call it the Cliff Notes version, but I think they're called Spark Notes now. I'm showing my age. But I realized Ashley said you can print the Jamboard. So I think instead of having kids copy all the questions down, after we make our class Jamboard, I'm going to print it so that they don't have to write down all these individual questions to speed things up a little bit. So they'll just put their answers on their individual copies. And I put them on that big paper that's 11 by 17. So when they fold it in half, it's like the size of a regular sheet of paper. And then I think I have one more slide. When we get to the end and they're putting all their unit challenge materials together, we finally got 1-to-1 this year in our district. I think we're the last people on earth. And now I've been having the students, instead of making posters at the end of the unit for a lot of the unit challenges, I just give them this really generic template. And I think I have the settings set up so that anybody with a link can view this. But I put just a few sample slides on in that presentation. And, you know, I just kind of go through and put these little scaffolds. This one's funny. Go back to that slide though. Insert solar system model here. I had so many groups that put the picture and they don't take those words out. You know, they have to, you don't realize like when it says insert something here, you take that out and then put your picture. And, you know, a lot of them, they just take their unit challenge packets and they hold it up to the camera on their Chromebook, take a picture and plunk it in there. And that has really streamlined this process, because otherwise I feel like you know how kids are, they'll take 5 days to put all this stuff together and they're trying to create it all from scratch. They need to be reminded, like, you already did all the work, you're just compiling it. So and then they never, I don't know, they struggle to find where things are in the unit challenge organizer. So I thought if I put this in there with each lesson and what question is being asked and answered in that lesson, it will help out. So, and then this is what some of the student work looks like when I get it back. So, you know, I tell them, like, you don't have to leave them quite as boring, you know, they can add animation, since some of them like to add sound effects and different things. But I tell them that's the last thing you do, because I usually give them 2 class periods, and you do that at the end, because otherwise they'll spend 2 days adding animations and they'll have no content.
Yeah,
And
then they're done that.
yeah. Well,
Thanks,
because,
Jen.
right, they're happy to be sitting there searching YouTube
Yeah.
for the perfect video or looking
Yep.
for clip art for 2 days.
Yep. Then they're done that. Thanks, Jen. All right. Next up is Megan.
Hi, everybody. So I threw some things in the chat as you were talking, Jen, about the grading. So similar. So that wasn't something I was planning on talking about. So I just shared that there as well. So I was going to start with grading and feedback, some examples. And I have not had a chance to get into doing the Google Forms yet. And I would say I kind of mix it up. I'd say every check your progress in a unit is different. And I would say, I don't know if that's great for students or awful for them. We've started using Schoology during, the pandemic, and we've been pretty lucky that we are continuing to use it. And there is like a way I can do assessments in Schoology. I know that's pretty unique to that, but I usually do 1 or 2 that way. I think it's similar to the Google Forms in that students can do multiple attempts really easily, so that auto grading and the multiple attempts are nice. It is nice because it does allow for some like ordering questions and drawing. But more so what I was going to talk about was some of the things using like Nearpods or Pear Decks or other ways with models. And actually really what I do with what I've been working on this year with giving feedback and asking students to do a little bit more work on responding to feedback. That's kind of been a goal of mine this year, because I feel like I spend hours giving feedback that gets totally ignored. So this year, and I only do this once per unit for a couple of reasons. One, because not every, check your progress really is worthy, I would say, of this kind of attention. And I also don't necessarily know that I would want to put this time and effort in every one. But in each unit, I have picked one check your progress where for the check your progress, they don't get a grade on the check your progress. They get a grade on their response to my feedback. So they are required to respond to the feedback. That's actually what gets graded, not the original check your progress. And I, to this kind of just using Google, like in a Google Doc that they all get. And I really do a lot of copying and pasting. So Chris, if you want to click on like the first My Notes example, that's in the natural selection and adaptation. And I'm also really working on giving everybody warm feedback and cool feedback, right? And trying to also focus. I know sometimes I can spend too much time nitpicking like every single thing that needs to be fixed. And then this is kind of forcing me to try to like pick the 1 or 2 things that are most important for that student to fix, right? Like instead of every little thing, because I also think about myself. If I get a lot of negative feedback, I shut down. I'm like, it's frustrating. It's upsetting. I don't really want to engage in it. It doesn't feel good. So trying to find a balance and giving everybody some positive feedback and then everybody some actionable feedback. And that's, I think, a key too. Like it has to be really something concrete that they can clearly change. So I end up making docs that have like the feedback that I think I'm going to use most often. And sometimes I do this as I'm working on the check your progress, right? Like you figure out as you're going what things they're tending to do well or what things are needing work, or sometimes ahead of time, right? Like what? So I make this first so that when I'm giving them their feedback, I'm literally just copying and pasting from this document which feedback they're getting, right? So I'm just copying and pasting from my kind of original. So if you want to go back, we could look at a student example. I am pretty sure I removed all student names from the student examples. So you can see on this one, this was a check your progress they actually did on paper, just by the nature of that one. So my feedback is there, and then they only had to respond to the cool feedback. So everybody got some warm feedback. Everybody had 2 things generally that they needed to give some improvement on. So you're not seeing their original work necessarily right there, but in some of the other ones, the other examples I have, you'd see their original work. If you want to go back to the original in the climate unit. Yep. So probably don't need to look at my notes again. This is one. Yep. Looking at a student example would be good. This is one they did in Nearpod. So they did some drawing of models, and I just copied and pasted those right from the Nearpod into the doc again. And you can see my feedback and then what they needed to improve, and then their improvements there, like what they did to fix it on the side. So again, like it's kind of I think a little bit of work to set up, but now that I have these, and I've just picked one each unit to do this year. So I did the one in the natural selection and adaptation unit, this one in the climate unit. And if you want to go back, the one I did in the climate change unit is from lesson 2. I picked this one in particular because I think it's really important that they understand the greenhouse system, you know, so they make a model of the greenhouse system on Venus in this one. There's lots of things in the model. I think this one's easy too, because it's really easy to find something that everybody did right in the model, right? Like even if it's just the key, like that might be, you did, you know, your key is really, you know, you included all the important components or something. So that has kind of been, so that's that example of what I've been doing with grading and feedback, and trying again to find a way that students are actually responding to all of the, you know, trying to help them. I would say the other thing with that climate change one, and so one of the things that's been nice is I give everybody actionable feedback. Even if you did things really well the first time, a couple kids, I gave them more information about Venus and was like, all right, your model's great, but now here's some more information. Now what would you change? And they still had to respond to the feedback. So if they chose not to, they didn't get an A necessarily on that assignment. And it only takes once for them to be like, oh shoot, I still have to respond to your feedback, even if I did things well. Yep, that's what I'm grading, is your response to my feedback. So yeah, so that's the grading and feedback example that I have. The next thing I was going to talk about was, so this is more just, you know, basic classroom arrangement and for doing things with uncovers. I do a lot of team roles, so jobs, right? Like a lot of people are maybe familiar with assigning jobs to students. I stole from our high school math curriculum the team tasks and roles template. So that's actually where that came from. It's kind of nice because they use the same roles and template then when they're in their high school math classes. So they're familiar with it. You know, it's something that they see in a couple of different places. And sometimes they change up these roles. As I definitely started with just keeping these 4. But as you'll see in some of my examples, I've started to change some of them a little bit. Now I have like a quality control manager, you know, some things like that as I've gone on. I use different methods for determining roles, right? I've used seat numbers, like you're in seat, I have round tables. So, you know, you're in seat 1, 2, 3, 4. In some of the example, like especially during COVID, when we were totally remote, I did things like talk about how many siblings you have, like whoever has the least amount of siblings is the recorder report, just to get them talking to each other and getting to know each other. Now I'm using cardinal directions because I feel like I want them to know north, south, east, and west better. So that's my picture you can see there of the cardinal directions. And then the next slides, if you want to go, just show some examples of like what that looks like. So this is one of my very first ones where I just really copied it straight from that CPM, the math one, and I didn't do a whole lot of changing to it. On the next one, it kind of shows a little bit more where I got a little better as I went on, like telling them, like putting the directions for the activity right with the roles on the same slide. So that's just there all the time. So, and doing some matching color coding, like whatever is in green might be what the facilitator is doing and whatever is in blue. You know, I don't always do that, but sometimes I do that. The next example, those first 2 are a little older. So I've been getting a little bit better. They don't always look perfectly neat, but again, like who's putting the names and roles. That way I know too, when it's their turn to share out, I just look right at their thing. Okay, I know who the recorder reporter is. You're the person responsible for sharing your group's responses, or I know who to talk to if it seems like people aren't participating. Sometimes I'll do the thing where it's facilitators, come do a check-in with me. I'm going to give you a hint, right? Or I will do the, facilitators go look at what another group is doing and come back, go steal an idea from another group, all those kinds of things. The next slide for this one kind of shows the work that they did. So kind of what the output looked like from that team task. It's usually the uncovers that are the team tasks. The next example is just a more recent kind of updated one. I've started to now in Jamboard. I used to often assign each person like a sticky note or a task, but I would say I found sometimes they weren't really collaborating. They each were just doing their task. So sometimes now I start where the Jamboard is view only, not editable. So they have to talk to each other. And I tell the facilitator to decide who's doing what. And we talk about like, what are people's strengths? What are people more comfortable doing? I found that has helped a little bit. I'm not micromanaging as much. I'm giving them a little bit more of that delegation work. And I feel like they're collaborating a little bit more by me telling them to delegate who does what. There's just one or two more examples you could click through real quick, Chris. Pretty much the same thing with the different roles and what they're doing for those. So those are just some examples of the roles. And then the last thing that I'm talking about is, I got two more. Unit challenge. So I would say I do a combination of what everybody else has talked about in terms of some things I do electronically. We are one-to-one, but some things I do paper pencil. So an example, or hybrid. So in natural selection and adaptation, I really did hybrid in that the day-to-day connects were all on paper. I have bins in the classroom with folders, because same thing. I teach 8th graders. They won't bring anything, or their bag is just a jumble of mess. And I started doing this years ago, like just leave it in the room, in the folder. You never need it at home. It just stays here, and then it's always there, and I never have to worry about it. So those are my bins for each of the hours, and I have them color coded by the classes for their folders. But this was an electronic at the end of the day. And it's very similar to what Jen shared with her first one. So if you just want to look at one of those examples in the first one, not the climate change one, Chris, sorry, I was in the natural selection and adaptation one. Yeah, one of those examples. So same kind of thing. It just was, all right, what's the problem? Slap your stuff in there, same kind, just gave them a basic template. And then they grabbed the stuff from their unit challenge. They took the picture with their Chromebook, and you can see right there, them took the picture of their Chromebook and, put it in there. So that's kind of a hybrid one where they did stuff on paper, and then the final unit challenge in using Google Slides. Other ones I do all paper pencil. So I put some examples of the posters. I think it just depends on the unit challenge. So the climate one, I think you do need to do a lot of like hands-on drawing with that one. So that was that one. And then the climate change unit, I do all electronically. I have no paper that I'm doing right now. So it really kind of depends. And it made that. So I've showed you guys I've included the link. That's my template of the unit challenge organizer that I put in the slides there, that you're welcome to use or look at if you're interested. And then I feel really guilty about lesson summary tables because I don't grade them at all in any way, shape, or form. And we really do it a lot together as a class. So I have my students do them electronically. And then I print them for them because I don't know if I should admit this, but I let them use them on the tests at the end of the unit. But they only get to use what they wrote. So if they don't do it, then they have nothing to use. And I do love the idea of that checklist. I might start doing that. I have started to take off row D recently, but I hadn't previously. But we talk about it as a group. I'll have them do them at their tables, and then we'll share out whole class and kind of come to consensus all together on what we should put there. So that's part of why I don't grade it, because we do it all kind of together. And I keep one posted in my classroom as well. I find that helps me. So, and I turned it on its side. Yeah, so that just visually for me. So then it's, you know, the squares get a little longer. It doesn't end up just on one page, but I like this, just the format. And I actually end up highlighting that the activity helped us understand that row, because I want them to like, that's where your reasoning, when you do a claim evidence reasoning, usually comes from, is from that row, like the what did we learn part, you know, of it, because that's where our definitions are and our big ideas. So I kind of really hammer on like, that's the row you need to utilize in all your explanations later on. So I think those were all of my examples that I was sharing today.
Muted. Thanks so much, Megan. I heard so many good, cool things. And it's fascinating to me to see how really flexible you can be and still have that, you know, maintain that NGSS kind of philosophy of teaching, and yet do it in different ways, you know, that meet your kids' needs, meet your needs. You know, teachers have different levels of tolerance for different things that they have patience, you know, to do, or you know, or room in your classroom, or whatever it is that you're, you know, different kinds of criterion constraints in your head that you're dealing with, but lots of different ways to approach this. And just amazing, really cool ideas. About row D, I did put something in the chat a little bit ago, just so you understand the history. That unit summary table is a tool that came from NGSS, from like Next Gen Science, and MyStar adopted it back in like 2016 because, you know, we were supposed to do that to have a good NGSS aligned curriculum. It was how you had kids record what they had talked about in that consensus discussion and what they had learned. And we had row D in there because initially we didn't have unit challenge organizers in the units. And then after a year or two, we started adding unit challenge organizers, and now all of our units have unit challenge organizers. So row D is kind of redundant. So feel free to eliminate row D if that's good. I mean, ideally, eventually, as we revise units, we'll go through and eliminate all the row Ds in all the units. But MyStar has a small staff, and you know, it might be a little while before we get to all of them. So yeah, drop row D. That makes everybody's life easier. Feel free to do that. All right, let's do breakout rooms for about 20 minutes or so. And this is a really small group. There's just 6 of you here for 4 of us. So I'm going to set up 3 rooms. And you're going to have the option of choosing a room, and then you can also choose to leave that room and go to a different room. So we're going to kind of do this just, you know, in a very open, kind of flexible way. So if you have questions for Ashley or Jen or Megan or all 3, you know, pop in a room, have a little discussion, pop out, pop in the next room, you know, and maybe there'll be some great conversation with the other people who are here too, the participants, because I was seeing some cool things in the chat. Like people have some good ideas also that they're doing that are related to some of these tips and tricks. So you may pick up some stuff from your colleagues as well. So we're going to put Jen in room 1 and Megan in room 2 and Ashley in room 3. And everybody else, you're just going to be able to select your breakout room, and we'll open them up. It'll be about 4:20, and then we'll close them at about 4:40. We'll come back together. I'm going to just ask people to maybe share one thing that they heard, or 2 things if you're super excited, or 3. But you know, come back with one thing to share, and then we'll be good for tonight. And hopefully you will walk away with something that you can implement tomorrow. Make your classroom a little bit run a little bit more smoothly. All right, thanks everyone. Hoping there was good conversation going on in there. I know people didn't bounce around too much, which makes me think you guys are having a good conversation in your groups. I would ask if you would take a minute or so and think about maybe something that you talked about in your breakout room that might be of interest to everybody here. And then if you would like to share it, just, you know, unmute and talk about what you heard, what was useful, what you might think other teachers might find useful. That'd be great. If you prefer to type it in the chat, we can look at it that way too. But if you would just think about something that you heard in that breakout room that was useful, that might be of interest to other teachers, and share it, either speak it or type it.
I was just going to say that one big thing that the room I was in, we all have to give ourselves some grace. We're kicking ourselves now. Why didn't I think of that? I love the unit summary table. We all said that. Why didn't we put that in there? Those are the key concepts. Well, because we didn't think of it, and that's okay. You know,
Yeah,
grace is really important. We were talking about going back to our first virtual lessons from when we were all virtual, and we thought we would create this cool stuff, and it's kind of cringy now, and wasn't our best of our best, but we had to start somewhere. So I think grace is really important when we're going through this and sharing.
thanks, Stacy. I can tell you that the MyStar curriculum team loves nothing better than to revise. They look at what they did in 2016, 2017, and it's a little cringy sometimes too. And then they start fixing things and making them better. So yeah, thanks for that. That's important to remember. We're all getting better at this.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
One of the things that I thought about was in these 2 sessions where you had it where we've been free flowing. It would have been really good if some of the input from our 2 sessions, like the suggestions that Ashley had and her methodology and whatnot, would have been some of that we would have gotten in our initial training in terms of getting organized.
Yep.
When we did the MyStar training over the summer.
Yeah. I absolutely agree.
This would have been really cool.
What we balance with that training is, I really could have everybody for 40 hours and we could really, get into everything we need. And so we're always trying to think of what can we squeeze in that 6 hours. But as we were doing this presentation, we'll have a recording, that'll be like posted on YouTube and the slides. And I think I will start including this in the phase 1 materials. So we may not have an hour and a half to go through all of it like we did today, but it'll be there as a resource and maybe we can touch on parts of it. Because you're absolutely right. It's starting to teach MyStar is overwhelming and you need everything. You need that, kind of structure about how the lessons are structured and the unit structured and some of that NGSS philosophy. And then you need some of the skills like how to manage productive talk and bubble maps. But then you also need the, what do I print for tomorrow? How do I keep this organized? So I agree. And this is going to become a useful resource for us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with, so was that Dustin talking?
No,
It was,
Is Dr.
Dr. Bell.
William?
yeah.
Oh, Dr. Bell. Okay. Yep. So Dr. Bell, I totally agree with you. I have 2 new staff this year with me at White Pine Middle School in Saginaw in my department. One started in October and one started 2 weeks ago. And they're now going with Chris through the stuff and they're like just above water right now. And they're asking me these types of things. How do you do this? How do you do that? Now that they're kind of getting the stuff down. So I do like the way that this was set up. Like this could be like a definite, like early on phase 1 training for new teachers because it's like the tips and tricks. I want to just speak on behalf of Megan. One, she had great passion when she was speaking to us, not to take anything away from Ashley or Jen, but Megan's new to me. So I went into her breakout room. And one of the things that I really liked that she did was the feedback, the cool feedback and the warm feedback. And I know feedback is so crucial and important. One of the items that I really like that I could stretch it out to is my students are always like, can I get a retake if they don't get the right feedback that they do well with? And them giving me back their feedback compared to what I gave them could be their retake. And so I could take what she's doing with feedback, and I love what she's doing, and incorporate that into my classroom for when I give my students responses back to how they did. And then I can get that retake problem that I have where I need to be able to, like, I got a kid that didn't do great. He's like, I want a retake for volcanoes. And I'm like, I don't have one. And so I could totally see me kind of transforming that feedback loop that I got right now in my classroom to what Megan had. And she was very helpful. I was with her and Holly and just us talking back and forth and flowing really well with what feedback was like and how we do unit summary tables. So I really enjoyed her passion and how hyped up she was when she was coming across with speaking to us, because it got me motivated.
Thanks,
Yeah,
John.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was with John and Megan, and something that they mentioned that I really liked was they post the CCCs and the DCIs in their room for themselves and the students. And I think that's something that sometimes falls to the wayside, not on purpose, but you just aren't necessarily like focusing on it throughout as much as maybe you could if you saw it every day. So I'll definitely do that. And I just thought that was like a really good tip as far as I love the summary table being posted. But I never would have thought of necessarily doing the CCCs and DCI. So I think that's really cool.
Thanks, Holly.
Chris, something that came up to me, and I know we've talked about it, I think in other circles before, is that there are pockets, and it's one of those things where inequity wise, not everybody has access to the same technology, right? Like Schoology or Illuminate, but there are a lot of people that do and who have written assessments in those places, and those resources like exist. And there is some sharing capability like across district lines and some of those resources. So I don't know who, where, when, like the time to like dig into, but it would be, that might be another session too, of just an idea of connecting people who have access to similar types of those tools to see like, so if you, maybe you do, because lots of districts have access to Illuminate in the state, I know, but if you've never really had the training on building assessments, and I mean, it definitely takes a long time, but that was half my job for like 4 years. So I have a lot of expertise there and have built a lot of assessments, and they're really useful for accommodations. The audio is automatically there. It reads every question to kids. So there's just some stuff that's there that I think we could probably get from each other more too. That came up. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I have to think about how we could set that up. Yeah, Jen says a MyStar share-a-thon. I know the assessment team has some reservations about modifying the assessments to fit those kind of automated grading things. And so I got to tell you, in Illuminate, I can have them draw. I can have them do open-ended. Like I'm not making the tests just be multiple choice. And in the Schoology assessments too, they can draw. They're still drawing models. So if I believe you, Megan. If you say it works, I believe you. I think they might. I have never used Illuminate. My district didn't use it. And I think the assessment team might be basing their experiences from 4 or 5 years ago. But this is gonna go on our list for learning series in the future. I think that's a great idea. There is huge interest in streamlining the grading process. And
I think the biggest thing with Illuminate, what people want to do is they want to take the constructive written response out of it.
Yeah.
But Illuminate does have that. And so your piece to it would be if it's going to be something that's shared out throughout, like I agree with you, Chris, with Fidelity, we want to push out our assessments. And if we're sharing across district, that the assessment team has a piece on, or somebody in our districts that is an Illuminate provider. Like I'm one of our head people for Illuminate in my district. And so you would be able to like maybe see our what we posted in there and have the assessment team say, yes, it still fits what we have in our Word doc that's going. You can take a constructed response, and what you have to do is you'd have to read the students' responses and then go in and click onto Illuminate what they scored. So the automation piece is not there, but then the data tracking is there into that one place. So I think it could definitely work, but you'd want to like the vetting process for sure. You'd want to make sure if you're sharing them out and you're having it be and to illuminate that we're not having teachers start to change those assessments. But Illuminate's a great piece for tracking data. I've even talked with Greg about like if we could pinpoint when the questions are being asked, what definite SEP or CCC or DCI is it really asking, so that we could put that into the standards on Illuminate. But he said that sometimes that is difficult with the 3 dimensions, that he knows that you guys hit them, but that it's not necessarily like question item A, question 1 is this specific DCI. It's a part of that one, but it's not the whole piece. So that, I know that's a difficult thing. That's something that I haven't been into as of late. Since the pandemic, I kind of moved a little bit away from data collection, and I'm focusing more on this one-to-one Google Classroom aspect that my district has now. But yeah, data collection for Illuminate is great for teachers, and that's why they like it. But if they don't change, if it, keep the test the same, would be very crucial.
Yeah. Okay. I'm taking notes. I'll see what how we can maybe organize this so that it's done with fidelity, but we can give people the opportunity to share. You've done the work already, why recreate the wheel?
Yep.
Yeah. That's useful. John, I liked how you're thinking about Megan's feedback as a retest. I was working with another district a few months ago, and their district policy is kids can retake the test as many times as they want. And they're like, where are we going to get these 3D assessment questions that they haven't already seen? Like, you can't just, keep rewriting these, because writing 3D assessments is complicated. But that might be a really interesting way to provide that retake opportunity without having to have an, indefinite or an infinite amount of 3-dimensional cluster scenarios for every single unit, because they're, really hard to put together. So thank you for that. All right. Anyone else? I see Dustin said, someone mentioned having more access to materials, especially for home and absent students. OpenSciEd has the option to import certain units to Google Classroom. Has MyStar considered something like this? MyStar stuff is all in Google Docs. So when you say import units, can you say more about that, Dustin?
Yeah, they just in OpenSciEd they had a few like imports where they would literally set up a Google Classroom for you. It was it's really nice. I'm not sure if you work with or know anything about OpenSciEd, but I would consider kind of looking at how they roll out things. It just streamlines a lot of the processes for some of the teachers. For example, they have like pre-made Google quizzes, Google forms for exit tickets, and just summaries. And it's just really nice for students who are missing or absent or have to work from home. You can just post them. It kind of keeps you organized a little bit more too.
And is that, Dustin, when you say OpenSciEd, I know that there's a bunch of different publishing companies that are licensing OpenSciEd products, but you have to pay for them.
I just go right through OpenSciEd.org, and I've been using their middle school science curriculum.
Okay. So,
and again, I didn't see it for every unit, because I remember Dr. Bell and I were looking at them, and he didn't have one that I did. So they're still working on it, but I noticed there's an import function, and it's just it doesn't do every single thing, but it's like the big parts of each lesson.
Okay, good to know.
And Dustin, I'm surprised you didn't mention that their templates are easier too. Dustin?
Yes, I heard you, Doc.
You want to say something to Chris about the templates in terms of the lesson planning?
What were you referring to specifically?
Like when you get ready to set up the slides, if you want to write over the slides, how OpenSciEd, their slides are so, it's almost like you just do this and everything is done. And
Oh yeah. So they have like step-by-step guides. They even have it down to like the timers, like you should spend about this much time doing it, this much time doing it. It makes it so you can kind of set up the plan periods a little bit more. It makes you so you're like, how much time should I be, letting them kind of having these debates or having these discussions or doing some of these things. It just helps you with the pacing.
Okay.
And it really makes it easy, especially as first year teachers that are rolling out or piloting those programs, because we can see, we can kind of gauge where we are versus where probably a more seasoned teacher in that area or is. And it was kind of hard for me, while I'm finishing up the unit 6.1, it's kind of hard for me to see where I should be in terms of what MyStar says versus where I am.
You're always behind.
Yeah, our
open side makes it easier.
Yeah, our estimated times are extremely optimistic, and probably not realistic. Good to know. We do have, we're working on that partnership with Kendall Hunt, and we'll see if we, right now there's only about 6 people total working for MyStar. So we're trying to prioritize, improving the things that we can. But bells and whistles like that it's good to know that teachers want that. And I will pass that on to the operating staff.
So just for clarity, Open Science is another curriculum. Is that what Dr. Bell is saying and
Yes.
Dustin's saying? It's
Yeah. NGSS
okay. And NGSS aligned. Okay. All right. So I just clicked on it. So I'm gonna kind of look at it, Chris, too, just on my end as a MTP and see what it kind of looks like and how it matches up different. In regards to the timing and everything with the resources, a lot of why it flows, I think, with MyStar too, guys, because I've been doing it since 2017, is it's really, if your students aren't getting it, you spend more time in a lesson. And if they are getting it, you are a little bit quicker, and it just kind of ebbs and flows. So I'm comparing my last year to this year data, and I thought I'm way ahead on the calendar. So I'm like, man, I'm just flying through stuff. And I really only trimmed off 4 days in my first 2 units so far, which is 8 days, which is almost 2 weeks of school, but it's only been 4 days. And I thought I flew through them. So I thought that was kind of funny on my part, that I'm thinking I'm doing much quicker. I'm doing much better. I will definitely get through the 4 units that are formatted, that are the suggested 4 units for science this year. And I might even dabble into the chemistry aspect of the 7th grade stuff that they have to offer. So the more you teach it, the more you start flowing with it better. That as a 5-year experience guy doing it.
Yes, that's true. And your kids get better at all of those processes too. But MyStar is working on communication, some communication products that are going to make it more clear that 4 units a year is, about right for most teachers and most students, maybe 3, maybe 5 if you get super fast or you do some shorter units. But that's been something that has not been clearly communicated consistently, like with administration, and we have a lot of turnover with administrators and that kind of thing. And so that's in the works in the next few weeks. You'll see some new ways we're going to show the unit choices instead of showing them like a calendar. For example, we'll show them as a list. So it is 5 o'clock and I don't want to keep you any longer. I absolutely have had a great time talking to you all. We do have some upcoming sessions. If you're interested, they're linked here. You can click directly on them, or you can find them on your teacher dashboard or our public events for educators page. We are really trying to build our private Facebook group where maybe we can start that conversation about sharing Illuminate, or those kinds of things where you can communicate with your colleagues in kind of a safer space, because it is private. You do have to have a MyStar subscription to be admitted. So consider that if you're a Facebook user. And other than that, I thank you. If you have another minute or 2 and you don't mind clicking on this feedback form, we do really listen to the things that you tell us. And, if you want to reiterate the things that you heard today or that you would like to see, that's great, but I did take notes. Again, thanks so much for your time. I'd like to thank our presenters for sharing their time with us and all of their great ideas. And hopefully we'll see you all soon. So tomorrow morning, you'll get information about the sketches and another invitation for the feedback. And have a great evening. And thanks again.